Jenna Hassel.
And I'm Hurley Winkler. Thanks for tuning in to the official podcast of the Jacksonville Public Library.
We have a special guest introducing the show with us today. Shawana Brooks is our arts and culture developer here at the Jacksonville Public Library. Shawana.
Hello, guys. So excited to be on this show.
Yes. So today's episode is all about your newest exhibit here in the Jax Makerspace Gallery. Tell us a little bit about this exhibit and where the inspiration for it came from.
Oh, thank you for asking me those questions, Jenna. This is the 7th major installation that we've done here in the Jax Makerspace Gallery, and the current exhibition that I just got finished installing across all 4 floors, which is also a first for the Jacksonville Public Library to have an exhibition that kind of talks to each other on each floor. It's called Jacksonville, A Tale of My City. The inspiration came a little bit, first from just like the title of a very classic book, A Tale of Two Cities. And I started thinking about what are the tales and the narratives for Jacksonville, and how do those also kind of dive in more once you kind of discuss certain sides of towns, and then even more, how do they start to digest once you get into specific neighborhoods. So with a couple of major anniversaries coming up around fall, it kind of seemed very timely to talk about, like, how do you show past perspectives and also current perspectives? And it was like, the medium of photography. Photography and film, I think, both have a really great way of putting you back into a place while you're still in a contemporary time and kind of seeing, well, how would I have been affected if I was maybe living back there? Or this is like my grandparent, like in this picture, and the kind of pride that you take from that and try to set yourself up. And sometimes you don't know when a photo is taken, so you might think, oh, it's now, and then you find out, oh, this was like 1913. Like with all the technology that we have, photography has really become a really interesting medium, because now we all have access to phones and we can take pictures just anytime that we want to. So I really wanted to showcase how can people do that and be a part of that story, and also add to the Special Collections neighborhood project that they were doing. So everything just kind of fell in place at a great time.
So this exhibit doesn't always encapsulate the warm and fuzzy qualities of Jacksonville, which is one of my favorite things about it. Can you tell us a little about that?
We try to make sure that we show a lot of different perspectives. And as I did the research for past kind of pictures and events that had showed Jacksonville, I kind of felt like certain narratives had not really been included. So how could we do that on a very, equitable basis? And so it just became a no-brainer to put that to the photographers. I never know when we invite certain people to be a part of the exhibitions what they're going to give. I just have a big idea in mind. I try to prep them on the theme and give them a little inspiration, and then I like the artist to just get to work. So the first thing, Hurley, that I kind of said to the artist was just, well, where are you from? And then more, where are you from? Now, where do you live? If you live a different place than where you were officially born, especially if you're a Jacksonville resident or if you're a transient. So we invited photographers who, some of them were born and raised here in Jacksonville, and others who have moved here and now Jacksonville is their home, so that each kind of photographer could go into their specific area and really look, how has this place kind of really shaped or impacted them, and how do they identify with that neighborhood? So it was the photographers who brought that work in, and once I saw it, I thought, well, this is definitely a very accurate tale of our city, and it's their tale. So it just became appropriate to put that in. And, I love different perspectives, and we don't always have the warm and fuzzies, but we have to give those people also the platform to say those kind of things so that we can continue to conversate with one another. Like, nobody just wants to hear one person just constantly spewing their opinion when yours might differ. So we're hoping a lot of different perspectives, now that the work is up and people engage in it, that they'll come in and share their tales too.
And where can folks find this exhibit, and how long does it run?
The exhibit will run from August 1st to October 21st, and it's all over the main library. I like to think of it as a little bit of like a cake as you kind of go up to each layer. So think of the first floor kind of as the present, and then as you get to the 4th floor, you're kind of delving back into the past. Most of our photographers are featured throughout the Jax Makerspace Gallery and another annex gallery that's very close. And then on the 2nd floor, we have photographer images by the city photographer, Wes Lester. On the 3rd floor, we have images by Bob Self, who's worked for the Times-Union for like over 2 decades. And then on the 4th floor, we were very privileged to work with civil rights historian Rodney Hurst, who gave us images from his particular exhibit, the Axe Handle Saturday, since we'll also be coming up on the anniversary, and we'll be having a very big program to commemorate the 58th anniversary of Axe Handle Saturday. So there's a lot to see across all 4 floors. And we'll be doing specific programs out at branches, which is very exciting for me. That's my first time of being able to program something and go out to communities. But if we're about neighborhoods, we got to make sure all the communities feel represented within this.
Well, thanks, Shawana, for joining us and telling us a little bit about this exhibit.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jenna, we had the honor and the privilege at Art Walk the other night during the opening reception of Jacksonville, A Tale of My City, to sit down with 3 of the photographers from this exhibit. We spoke with Bob Self, Malcolm Jackson, and Cheryl McCain, and we have those interviews for you today. So take a listen, folks. Take a listen. Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so excited to see more of your work in the gallery.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for bringing me on the podcast, and let's have some fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's get started. You grew up in Jacksonville, right?
Yeah, born and raised, okay. 135%.
That's awesome. So what first drew you to photographing different parts of Jacksonville?
From studying photography and studying a lot of street photographers and seeing how they took a lot of keen interest in certain communities that they dealt with, I kind of took that under my wing. And also, through that process, a lot of stories that my dad told me about old LaVille in the 70s and 80s, that stuff always resonated with me, but there's not too many photographs of that work that's being shown to the public. So I was blessed to know about those type of stories and, visually see some of those things. So I kind of was like, well, I would take that upon myself for the future generation. So whatever Main Street or the neighborhoods that I'm at the time, whatever they may look like now, whatever they may look like in 30 years, at least we'll have documentation of what they might have been from this point. Hopefully better, hopefully not worse, but at least there'll be a documented ordeal. So.
Wow. It sounds like you have a lot of family support to pursue this.
Yeah, it took a while, of course. If you're not a football player, doctor, well, pharmacist is a doctor too. So if you're not in one of those type of fields, of course, you're in Jacksonville, your parents look at you and tell you, you don't know. And then, when they see a few shows that I've done over the past couple of years, they've been very, very supportive. And they've been very supportive about Jacksonville history. They taught me at a very young age of where I come from and who came from this place, and I've always had a lot of pride instilled in me, so no matter where I go, definitely.
Are there certain neighborhoods that you like to photograph more than others, or is it the variety?
I mean, variety, but majority of my work right now is based in Springfield, Eastside, Northwest Jacksonville. I practically grew up in all of those areas, primarily Springfield, Eastside. My whole family is from Northwest Jacksonville area. So those are just the ones that I just frequent to the most, but, wherever the car stops, pretty much where the camera goes. So
right, you're always ready.
Yeah, but also too, in today's time, when you're looking at Jacksonville through photos, you don't see too many of those areas in a more positively realistic light. That makes sense. We see the news all the time in these areas, so some people might know these neighborhoods through the news, but they're not necessarily the most positive ordeal. But I might know that particular person that might have been on the news talking about the violence, this, that, and the third, and then you go to these neighborhoods again and photograph, and you really get to meet these particular people, and it's a whole different ball game. So I did kind of take a little bit of a what's the term I'm looking for here? I just pushed myself into that situation to be the guy to document and tell the correct story for that area. And it's also fun now, some people do look at my work. Half of the people that seen it will be like, man, I've never seen, this side of town like this before. They don't even know that it's there. And then the other half of people that have seen town say, hey, man, like, that's my grandma's house. Like, I thank you for taking a picture of my grandma's house. So it's been a humbling thing, and it's such a blessing to be able to do that and for people to embrace me doing this because, I don't necessarily ask for permission. When I take photographs of people like that. I know today's time that might be a little bit on the sensitive side. I have to be careful of, but I think to get the realness, that's the only way I know how to approach it right now. So I'm thankful that the community supports me and embraces me with love anytime I have my camera out.
Yeah, definitely. So having been born and raised in Jacksonville, 135%, as you said, I bet you've noticed a lot of changes, especially in the Springfield East Side area. What changes have you noticed?
It's a lot more breweries on Main Street.
That's one way to say it, yeah.
It's growing up as a kid, Main Street and the East Side was a pretty rough area. It was at some point, certain parts of Main Street you couldn't even drive down if you didn't have a firearm for safety. It was very, very rough. It's still citizens to this day that will not drive down Main Street because of what they've seen or experienced in that time period. And that came with the deconstruction of La Villa and whatnot, because a lot of those residents moved from La Villa and they just moved north and east. And as time has gone by, I noticed, at least as far as how Main Street has come about now, I've noticed a lot of people that are starting the businesses are from the area now. So they are starting to give back, but it's still a little different. Like, these are still heavily African-American neighborhoods, and it's still not a lot of African-American presence being towards the forefront. But for some of the businesses, I can speak as far as on the Main Street side of things, they are hiring people from the neighborhood who are predominantly African-American that live in the neighborhood. So it's good and bad on that side of the fence. But, right now I can say it's changing for the better at this present time. But, we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. What was your relationship like with the library growing up?
Oh, man. My grandma used to take me to the library. I grew up going to the library on Edgewood.
Murray Hill branch?
Yeah.
The super big one on Edgewood and in Northwest Jacksonville.
Oh, the Brown & Brooks branch.
Yes, that
yeah.
one. Yeah. When I was a kid, I used to think it was like Bruce Wayne's Manor, because it was so big. And I was like, that's what
It's
Batman
huge,
lives.
yeah.
So I used to go to that one all the time, and that's where I got my first library card, and I used to go there. And just over time being around the different branches, and it was always a place where I can go read, or even before we had the internet and stuff, I can go get on the internet and learn about what, things like that in nature and whatnot. So the library has always been infused in my life and continue to be, either with the main library now, or even going to the Dunn Avenue location every now and again, even for a conference or something, big or small. The library always plays a big part in the community. So when it was time to do this show here, it was no brainer. Yes.
Right. Right. So tell us a little bit about the work you have in this show, Jacksonville, A Tale of My City.
Okay. Basically what I did with the work, when Shawana brought the idea to me, with consolidation, I was like, well, let's just put, the size of talent that most of these people may know about, let's put it out there for show in the forefront. Let's let them see the reality of what we are living with and show the true living nature of this neighborhoods, with the Springfield East Side and Northwest Jacksonville and some North Side work. These are very strong, tight-knit communities. Like, you go to most of these communities, everybody knows everybody. Like, the North Side is a big side of town, but I promise you, everybody knows everybody. So it's a very tight-knit community, and I kind of want to show that through the work. Even like with one of my favorite photographs up there is with the dirt bikes. Just seeing the other guy pushing them on to keep doing a wheelie. I mean, yeah, that might be dangerous, but just that small little moment right there, just showing that, he really cares about him pushing himself creatively or whatnot like that. And just showing the reality of the neighborhoods that we do live in. I mean, there's another photograph with a guy standing by Hogan's Creek. And Hogan's Creek has been, in very, very bad shape probably over the past 15, 20 years, and just showing the realities of that. And it's not too far from downtown, and downtown supposed to be this big, gigantic beauty jewel, but you got that right there behind you. So, just trying to show the reality, and that, Jacksonville is beautiful, but it is what it is in certain areas too. And we look to the community to help with that. So that's what I try to show with this work.
Yeah, I think you really captured kind of the heart of the community that not everyone sees. Like you said, people see the news headlines when they're not so positive, but I think a lot of your works really got to the heart of these communities, which is really important for us to see, especially in this show.
Yeah, definitely. And, and showing some things like traditional stuff, like with the giant green Chevy. I think that's in the middle of the gallery. That's a personal favorite of mine, too. Just showing things like that, because that's a very Jacksonville thing too. I mean, anybody can come in here and they can say, I've seen one of those cars somewhere, probably a few minutes ago. So just putting a lot of those key things to tell the story of Jacksonville, because that is just as important in Jacksonville as everything else too. So definitely.
Yeah. And being so young, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but you look young.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 25.
Yeah, okay. And
I didn't have no choice being born like that.
No, being so young and realizing the importance of, you know, capturing the neighborhoods as they are now to archive for future generations is, you know, something to really value, and that's super important.
Yeah, and that's kind of, and again, that just goes back to why I kind of got into doing this style of work. It was, you know, whatever Jacksonville may be in the next 30 or 40 years, these kids need to see proof of what Jacksonville was. And so they can tell their kids and whatnot, hey, this is what I come from. Look what you have. Be proud of where you come from. People all say all the time, well, I need to leave Jacksonville. Why? You can't give me a real reason why. Well, I'm going to show this work to show you why you need to keep pride in this particular place, because you're going to end up coming back here. You want these people to accept you the same way that you left. So that's why I do that.
That's wonderful. So we ask at the end of all of our interviews, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid?
Roller coaster theme park designer.
Wow.
Did you play Roller Coaster Tycoon?
I played every roller coaster theme park game known to man. I still, I mean, my girlfriend will tell you this right now. I still like analyze and design stuff and look at roller coasters, and I can tell you what come out of Disney World in the next 5 years.
Whoa.
Like, I'm deep into that culture.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I haven't thought about Roller Coaster Tycoon in years.
me
I
neither.
played that religiously on the
Same.
computer as a
It
kid.
keeps me sane. It's just, you know, again, letting your imagination go. What can you do to send people hurling around and trying to throw up or something? Like, I don't know, it's some type of joy in that to me.
That might be the best answer we've heard so far.
Oh, definitely.
That.
And I
That's
love
awesome.
that the dream has never really
Yeah,
died.
Oh, no.
exactly.
no,
You're
no,
still
no,
into
no,
it.
No. Disney gets my money. Disney gets my money.
That's
Cool.
incredible. Well, Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us on Completely Booked.
No,
Yeah.
definitely.
Congratulations
Thank
on
you.
the
It was a
show.
pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bob Self, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
It's really an honor to have you here today. I grew up in Jacksonville, and I grew up reading the Florida Times-Union every single morning with my dad, and your name is one that I've seen for my whole life. So really, it's an
probably.
honor and a
I'm pretty
pleasure. No, I don't mean it that way, but you are so esteemed.
Local
and you're-
celebrity.
You are. You're a local celeb. You're an incredible photojournalist, and it's really an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you.
So you've been, like you said, you've been with the Florida Times-Union for decades now. How long have you been with them?
August this month makes 34 years.
Holy mackerel. Congratulations. That's incredible.
Thank you.
So what changes have you experienced as a photojournalist through the years?
Technology has been the biggest thing. I mean, I started out in the business, film and chemicals and darkroom printing, and we'd sit down at a typewriter afterwards and peck out our captions on a sheet of paper, cut it off, scotch tape it to the back of the print, and hand it off to the layout people. You know, now it's shoot digital and pop the disc into the computer or download the photos, put on a caption, and use a wireless to transmit the photos back to the server. You know, and that can happen in minutes if you need to. So, yeah, the technology's constantly changed. But good photojournalism really hasn't.
And what makes good photojournalism?
That's a tough question, but I think in the simplest terms, it's good, relatively quick read visuals that tell a story, that draw a reader in to tell the story. I mean, I think it has to have a nice combination of things that generate an emotion or capture an emotion that other people can relate to. And it's more than just taking a picture to show what somebody looks like.
Definitely. And you absolutely capture so many emotions, a realm of emotions in your photos in Jacksonville, A Tale of My City. Tell us a little bit about the photo series you did in La Villa a few years ago.
Well, it came after a project that I had done a few years prior at American Beach, where I'd spent several summers doing a documentary project, just personal work. And I've always loved long-term projects where you just keep revisiting the same people or the same area again and again and again, because that's the only way you ever get to know it. And that's the only way anybody gets to know you and trust you enough to let you into their lives. And myself, and I believe it was Bob Mack, who was one of the photographers at the time, we were coming home from a football game. And we were just talking, and he said, you really ought to do something on La Villa because, they're about to start cleaning that area out. And it had never crossed my mind. And it's like, duh, yeah, I should do that. And so for the next 17 months, I'd, go park close by, and it's only a few blocks from the newspaper building. So if I had a slow day, I'd go walk the streets for a few hours. Or if I had a really slow day, I'd spend all day just walking around and with the cameras and talking to people and shooting and making observations. And slowly, steadily, the regulars that were still in the neighborhood kind of got a feel for who I was and had a certain level of trust with me being there and gave me access to things that otherwise, I would never have had any reason to be there and would never have been invited to be a part of.
Right. The trust aspect of that series seems crucial because in a lot of these photos, you are inside of people's homes and folks look pretty vulnerable in some of these photos. What was that like?
That's kind of what I've done my whole career. Whether I've got a very limited amount of time with somebody or I've got an extended period of time, you have to let people know that you respect them as a person, and they've got to figure that out really quick. And if you come off as being exploitive in any way, they know it. They know it right away. And I learned that lesson early on. And I've also always taken the approach that none of my subjects owe me anything. They are sharing a part of their life that they don't have any obligation to share with me. And I've always taken that approach to people. I just, I'm grateful for the time that they give me, the things in their life that they're willing to share with me. And I've been doing it for 34 years at the paper and for a number of years before that. I don't take it for granted. I don't feel like anybody owes me anything when I'm out on the street.
Right. What's your relationship like with the library?
It's been really good.
Good.
It's because I do other things with the library other than this show. I don't know if you're familiar with up in the Florida collection, the Lloyd Sandgren photography collection is I had a hand in that getting here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that collection.
Lloyd was a commercial photographer, came to Jacksonville in the 40s as a Navy photographer at Mayport, and stuck around after the war. And with the exception of like 1 year in 1946 where he was working for the Department of Commerce out of Tallahassee, he spent his whole career as a professional photographer in Jacksonville, bouncing around between a series of different downtown studio spaces, often where he lived and worked at the same time. I met him as a chance encounter on the street one day, right off Hemming Plaza, as I was loading up after an assignment. And it was just a bizarre encounter where a little old guy with a big pot belly and red suspenders and a big white beard comes over and starts asking me questions about my equipment. And I always try to be polite to everybody, and so I answer his questions. And then at some point he goes, "Well, I'm a photographer." And you kind of, you don't want to roll your eyes, but it's like, yeah, everybody's a photographer. That's nice. And he had this 3-ring binder with him. And he goes, "Do you want to look at some of my pictures?" And I was fully expecting to see, bad sunset and flower photos.
Right.
And open it up, and it's black and white prints from large format negatives of skyline views from the 50s, commercial product shots, really high quality, really nice stuff. And at that point, it's like, oh my gosh, you are a photographer. And so I started asking him all the questions at that point, thinking it would just be a great story for the paper, and it was. And then we just became friends, and we stayed friends until he passed. And after he passed, I worked with his daughter, and I asked her to let me salvage all of his collection from his little one-bedroom apartment in Springfield and keep it safe.
That's incredible.
And,
And now it's housed here in the main library and our Florida collection, which is on the 4th floor in special collections. We're really lucky to have it. Yeah.
What year was that when you met him? Do you remember?
It's been a while. He's been gone for about 10 years now. So, and I knew him for quite a while. Yeah, I should know that off the top of my head, but a lot of years have gone by since then.
Yeah. That's a pretty cool story. Because I've seen those pictures on our digital collection on our website, and they're incredible to see.
Well, Lloyd always thought about him as just kind of his notebooks of just a record of what he shot. He just liked to show his stuff. And as soon as I saw it, it's like, this is an amazing collection that documented Jacksonville at probably one of the most dynamic periods in its history. You know, the 40s and the 50s, right after the war, and downtown was booming, and there were just tons of people and businesses all downtown. And, you know, and he had kind of a mischievous eye, and he shot things that he liked. I mean, he was a guy's guy. He liked cars. He liked the ladies. He liked the macho stuff. And, you know, there's bathing beauties and bodybuilders on Jacksonville Beach. You know, professional wrestling from the 60s in the old Coliseum. You know, just fun stuff. It's hard not to like it.
So, Bob, we asked this question at the end of all of our interviews. We'd love to know, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I was always a science nerd.
Interesting.
I always loved the sciences. I always loved critters. You know, I was not one of the cool kids. You know, in high school, everybody else was partying and going out. You know, I was spending my time swimming down in Sebastian Inlet collecting tropical fish for saltwater aquariums. You know? And I went off to college thinking I was going to become a veterinarian. And after struggling through the core biology sequence with 750 other pre-science majors and bombing the core chemistry, I figured, probably not going to make it to vet school. But I was still sure I was going to be in the sciences. And 2 years into taking all these different biological science courses, I started taking some pictures for the yearbook at University of Florida, and then started doing some lab work for the Department of Informational Services, and they started giving me assignments. Then I started doing work for the Alligator, and it's like, I kind of like this. And so I switched majors, ended up being a fine arts major, working in photojournalism the whole time I was in school.
Well, we are very lucky that you did not become Bob Self, the veterinarian, although I'm pretty sure you would have been great at that too. But your photos are stunning, and we really appreciate your time coming on our podcast today and sharing your work here in the Makerspace Gallery. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cheryl, thank you so much. Welcome to Completely Booked.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I understand this is your first show, right?
Yes.
Your first exhibit?
First real exhibit.
Welcome. Well, congratulations. We love your work.
Super exciting.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so you first arrived in Jacksonville through the military, right?
Yes, back in 97.
Okay, so what was your first impression of Jacksonville?
Well, you know what? Let me back up.
Okay.
To be honest with you, the first time I ever been through Jacksonville, I was 12 years old. And I'm from Central Florida, so we were heading to Philadelphia, and I was like, wow. And I was like, oh, there's a Prudential building. That's on our church fans.
I see. Early memories of Jacksonville.
Yeah, so, and it's kind of crazy because it kind of goes full circle in a sense. First time I ever passed through Jacksonville was 12. We were going to Philly, which happened to be my first duty station. And then I ended up back here, and I retired here, and now I live here. So my career kind of began here through the MEP station, and I shipped out from Jacksonville, and then my career ended here.
Okay, you just loved it and stayed.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So you have a particular interest in photographing Jacksonville's historic buildings.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so what draws you to these buildings?
Back in 2009, I've lived on the south side, I lived on the west side, but in 2009 I moved downtown, and it was part of the city I had never really explored, and so I was just so intrigued with the older buildings. I lived in the Carling, even the history of the Carling itself. So at that time, though, I wasn't into photography. And but I was just intrigued with Jacksonville's history, so I did a lot of research about the city, its history, and love Springfield. That's where I live too. So that, part of that's one of the more older neighborhoods, and so I think that's what drawn me to stay here too. It's a great city, a city of potential, and it just has this mixture of the old and the new. So that's why, that's what drew me into like wanting to photograph and capture a lot of things, because it's constantly changing too. So that's still, very important to me. For example, the bus station. Mm-hmm. That's where I left to go to Orlando, but now it's no longer the bus station. You have another location now. So those things kind of, for me is nostalgic and kind of like record keeping in a sense.
That's kind of what this, exhibit is a little bit about, is kind of archiving some of the current history of Jacksonville, which a lot of times we don't think about. We just think of, the older pictures that people took, decades ago.
Right.
But it's important to archive, start archiving them now.
Right.
So that's wonderful. And tell us a little bit about the pieces that you chose for this exhibit.
Well, the pieces, the black and whites, there's 5 black and whites and there's 1 in color, which is the 16 by 20 of the Main Street Bridge. That was my first, the black and white was my first time riding on the, what is that?
The Skyway?
The Skyway.
Skyway, yeah.
And so it was a different perspective to view the city. And it for me, it was kind of interesting. And not only that, it didn't look like Jacksonville, It looked like any major metropolitan city that had that mixture of the old and the modern buildings. And so I decided to let that be my narrative for this exhibit, and just capturing some of the old buildings. Who knows, in a few years they may not be here. The way things are changing here in Jacksonville, and I just thought it was intriguing to shoot from that perspective, and just looking out over the city. But the Main Street Bridge was kind of separate from that, actually, and I just happened to be walking from Springfield to downtown. It was a foggy day, and I got to I guess you could say, the first platform or balcony, and you couldn't see the South Bank. And I was like, wow, this make for a great picture. So it's just, right place, right time, I guess,
And that photograph is amazing. Hurley posted that on our library social media, and I think it was one of our most popular posts from the exhibit. So
people are crazy about it. It's just so beautiful. Like the fog is like right down the middle of the photo. It's incredible. Yeah. And the Main Street Bridge is just, it's just shining so blue and bright. I love that photo.
That one is actually a part of a series of, capture. I like foggy days, so it kind of give Jacksonville this netherworld. So I have one where this little dragonfly happened to fly into the shot, and it looks like a helicopter. But and it was a foggy day. The clouds looked like they were really low, but it was just a lot of low fog. And so that one is a part of an actual series that I'm actually working on.
Okay. And what's your relationship like with the library?
Well, I used to come here all the time, especially when I lived downtown. My kids, they love the library. And I do genealogy research as well. So I have spent many hours upstairs going through the census books and so forth, researching my family history.
Wow. Have you found anything interesting?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, my great-great-grandmother, her parents, it was a bit of a mystery. So I managed to find her mother, a record of her marrying, which was my great-great-great-grandfather, and her aunt, Josie. Her name was Josie Hightower. So I was able to find that, and so that kind of helped put some things together and answer some questions, actually, So it was kind of exciting. It was really exciting, actually.
That's so awesome. And you did that here at the main library in the genealogy collection up in the 4th floor.
Yes.
So cool.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Wow. And we like to ask this for everyone that comes on completely booked.
Okay.
And we want to know, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be in the nursing field, but I'm definitely scared of needles.
Same.
So that didn't work in the Navy. I ended up being a welder.
What?
Yeah. So I didn't plan on going into the military at all. It was kind of like I was ready to leave the little small town and just go see the world. And photography pretty much fell into my lap literally when I was 40. And I've only been doing this 4 years. And there was a friend of mine that gave me an actual camera. She gave me a DSLR. That was my first DSLR. And from that point on, I said, okay, I'm going to go to school for this. And I started school, went for 2 years, had to drop out because of my husband's health. And but I still pushed and very passionate and still want to pursue this forever if I can.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely on the right path. Your work in the exhibit is beautiful.
Thank you.
And are the cameras yours?
Yes, that's
Okay.
my camera collection.
And you have a camera collection on display here. Tell us about that. How did you collect all of those cameras?
To be a mate. Actually, some of them, I actually had old shipmates that seen my work online and say, hey, I got something for you. Send me your address. And this was during a time like I was struggling. Like I was ready to give it up. And he sent me 2 Brownie cameras from the 1930s. And I literally was like, oh, I started crying. And, some of them are gifts. Some of them belong to their families. Like, here, we know you're going to take care of these. And I have about maybe over 30. There's 20 on display here. And they range from 1903, which is one of those on display, to about the 90s. I don't count my digital camera, my Sony A7. That's not a collector item. That's the one I mostly use. But I have quite a few 35 millimeters. Of course, you've seen the Polaroids, which is one of my favorites because it takes me back to when I was a kid. And my father, he was a photographer as well. But he wasn't, he was an amateur photographer. He didn't really pursue it like how I'm doing it now. And I even have one of his he passed on to me as well.
So you recently started collecting these.
Right. I've been collecting in the last 3 years.
Wow.
Now I have about 30-some cameras.
Oh,
That's
my
quite
gosh.
a collection.
Yeah, you
in
jumped
such a
right
short
into
time.
it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
remarkable.
Just a little bit obsessed with cameras. I absolutely love them, especially film cameras. I just feel like film is a little bit more intricate. Digital, to me, is easy, I would say. I know some people's like, no, what do you mean it's easy? But I say that because with digital, it's that instant gratification almost. You can look at it, it's like, I don't like it, I'm going to delete it. But, when you're using a roll of film, you got 38 chances not to mess up, 38 to 36 exposures, those chances not to mess up. Or even with the Polaroid, now it's only 8 exposures, unlike it used to be 10. So you really have to push yourself to, understand lighting, composition, look in your viewfinder, and capture what it is that you're trying to capture.
Yeah.
Well, it's so cool having so many vintage cameras here in our photography exhibit. So thank you for loaning those to us. We
Yeah.
appreciate
And
it.
will those be here for the entirety of the exhibit through
Yes.
October 21st?
Yes.
Awesome.
As long as you guys would like to have them here, yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much again for coming on here. Congratulations on
Thank
your
you.
first exhibition.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is wonderful and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Wow. What an episode. So many people. It was so much fun getting to be down there during Art Walk to talk to everyone. We had the DJ going, and so there was a little noise, but it was super fun. Make sure you guys come to the main library to check out Jacksonville, A Tale of My City through October 21st, anytime the library is open.
Yes, we hope to see you around here soon. Make sure you learn more about our podcast at jackspubliclibrary.org/podcast, and please leave us a review, preferably a 5-star review.
Yes, we actually have just gotten a couple of our first reviews, so we appreciate you guys.
And they were all 5 stars. So
Always.
Seriously, guys, that is killer.
Yes.
Keep it coming.
Keep them
it
coming.
Make sure you like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Jax Library. This podcast was produced by Brian Thomas, a.k.a. BT, a.k.a. Producer Brian. Goodbye.